in 231 BC. The natives were hostile to Roman rule, and so, content to keep to their coastal settlements, the Romans mostly left the rugged interior to the locals, which was an agreement. Corsica and Sardinia had little political or economic impact on the greater empire, but for a time, they practically held the fate of the Mediterranean in their hands, as first Julius Caesar and then Octavian relied on the grain coming out of the two islands to feed their armies. Had anything happened to disrupt the food supply coming from those relatively unimportant islands, the history of the world may have been very different. The first official territory outside Italy claimed by the Romans on the European mainland, not counting their still undefined holdings in Spain, had been Transalpine Gaul, or Gaul on the far side of the Alps, which was annexed in 121 BC. The territory stretched from the Alps in the east along the Mediterranean coast to the Pyrenees in the west. The Romans had previously entered into an agreement with the local Greek colony of Massilia to allow the Romans passage from Italy to Spain in exchange for Roman protection from the barbarian Gauls in the north. After the legion successfully campaigned against the northern Gauls in 123 BC, the territory was officially brought into the burgeoning Roman Empire. The strip of land thereafter became known to the Romans affectionately as Our Province, a name which has stuck with the region over the years, and the French know it today as Provence. North of Our Province was the wild interior of Gallia Comata, or long-haired Gaul. Long the setting of many a Roman nightmare, Julius Caesar finally banished those particular demons in the 50s BC and brought everything east of the Rhine, south of the English Channel, and west of the Atlantic Ocean under Roman control. In 22 BC, Marcus Agrippa divided the country into 3 separate provinces to better reflect economic and geographic divisions. Lugdunensis, the most important of the 3, containing both the Roman capital of Lugdunum, hence the name, and a major imperial mint. Aquitania, which bordered Spain and wound up a minor pro-praetorial province run by the Senate, and Belgica, which formed today's Low Countries and was the last and least Romanized of the 3 Gauls. There never was a single Gallic race, and even Agrippa's rezoning did little to accurately reflect the realities of the multiple and rival Gallic tribes that lived in the country, each considering themselves independent of every other. Each year, though, all the kings and chieftains would meet in Lugdunum for a ceremony that formalized the one bitter reality they all shared. Rome was in charge, and the emperor was their master. It wasn't really that bad, though. Most of the truly independent-minded chiefs had been killed, leaving behind a tribal elite that had been quickly and thoroughly Romanized. Except for a few minor flare-ups, and one big transgression in 260 AD, which we'll get to one of these days, the provinces of Gaul remained a loyal and stable corner of the empire, providing from its rich land a variety of agricultural products, including by far the best cheese, and from its talented locals, high-quality glass, metal, and woodwork. East of the Gallic provinces were the military zones of Germania Inferior and Germania Superior. Until Domitian, the zones were technically a part of Belgica and Lugdunensis respectively, but in reality, the generals commanding the legions along the Rhine were autonomous, and so Domitian turned the 2 zones into true provinces to better reflect this reality in the 80s AD. The character of the German provinces was dominated by their strategic defensive position. 2 legions were stationed on the Lower Rhine, and 2 on the Upper Rhine, making it one of the most militarized territories in the empire. Until the focus of Roman war-making shifted to the Danube in the early 100s AD, the Rhine legions were the most fearsome fighting force in the Roman world, and were tasked with fending off the menace of German invasion. In addition to formalizing their provincial status, you'll recall that Domitian also spent a great deal of time and attention constructing the Limes Germanicus, which not only served as a defensive barrier, but was also a way to control trade coming in and going out of the empire. Specifically, the highly lucrative trade in amber. One of the most valuable commodities in the ancient world, and found in abundance along the Baltic coast, it would be shipped down along the so-called Amber Road to Rome, with gold returning in kind. Domitian made sure that the Roman state got a piece of the action both ways by forcing traders through the gates of his well-armed limes. Across the English Channel from mainland Europe was the foggy island of Britannia, which became an imperial proconsular province following Claudius's invasion in 43 AD. The island may have seemed an unimportant little piece of land, but the 3 legions stationed there tell a different story. Aside from Syria, no single province housed as many permanent legions as Britannia, which begs us to ask the question, why? The answer is that Britain contained abundant natural resources that were inconveniently located beneath the feet of unruly, independent-minded locals. In addition to gold, silver, tin, iron, lead, and marble that could all be dug up in great heaps, Britain also provided the empire with wool, timber, animal skins, slaves, due to the persistent revolts, and, of course, the best hunting dogs money could buy. This combination of natural wealth and angry locals added up to one of the most militant provinces in the empire. Hadrian settled the northern border of the province with the famous wall he ordered built in 122, though Antoninus built his own wall about 100 miles north that became the new border of the empire for about 20 years, until it was abandoned for a variety of reasons in the 160s AD. Despite its unruly natives, Britannia would remain a lucrative corner of the empire until it was abandoned in the 400s by a Western Roman Empire facing both internal division and external barbarian invasion. South of Britannia and across the Pyrenees from Gaul lay the Iberian Peninsula, which the Romans called Hispania. Long in the Roman orbit, it was actually one of the last territories in the empire to be truly pacified, holding out until Marcus Agrippa finally dealt the decisive blow against Spanish independence. The Roman foothold in Spain originally Scipio Africanus during the Second Punic War, and was settled initially by his wounded veterans. The territory along the coast Scipio had snatched from the Carthaginians was divided into Hispania Ulterior and Hispania Citerior, or literally, further Spain and nearer Spain, which would remain the Roman administrative districts until 13 BC, when, following Agrippa's final pacification efforts, Augustus divided the now wholly owned Iberian Peninsula into Lusitania, basically modern Portugal, Baetica, modern Andalusia, and the largest of the 3, Tarraconensis. Ironically, once the Spanish tribes were finally beaten down after 200 years of near constant warfare, the peninsula only required a single legion stationed in Tarraconensis to maintain order. Hispania was one of the richest and most important regions in the empire. Its gold and silver mines were the best in the known world, and the Romans developed complex hydraulic mining techniques to extract every last ounce of precious metal from the Spanish mines. But beyond the geologic resources, which included marble, tin, and lead, the fertile Spanish countryside made Hispania a center of olive oil and wine production. These 2 products alone, the liquid that kept the empire running, would have been enough even without the gold mines to make the province of Spain wealthy beyond measure. As we've seen, by the age of the Antonines, the Roman-Spanish elite formed a powerful faction within the Senate, producing at the height of its power 2 of the best emperors the Romans ever had, Trajan and Hadrian. Across the Strait of Gibraltar, which was either carved by or narrowed by Hercules, depending on who you ask, lay the twin provinces of Mauritania, Mauritania Tingitana and Mauritania Caesariensis, both of which were minor procuratorial provinces on the northwest African coast. Following the victory over Carthage, the territory was made a client kingdom dominated by its eastern neighbor Numidia, which was the preeminent Roman client state in West Africa at the time. In 40 AD, for no real reason at all, Caligula lured the loyal king of Mauritania into a trap and had him executed, claiming the leaderless kingdom as his own personal domain, hence the name Caesariensis. Revolt followed, but Claudius decided that what was done and formally annexed the kingdom in 43 AD. Mauritania's primary contribution to the empire was wool and a high-quality, always in-demand purple dye, though it was also known for providing the legions with excellent light cavalrymen. Eventually, the province would become troubled by local Berbers, the dark-skinned North African natives, who had resisted first Phoenician, then Carthaginian, then Roman encroachment. The Berbers of Mauritania became known as Moors, Mauritania, get it? And would eventually wreak havoc on the undermanned but incredibly rich province of Hispania, beginning during the reign of Marcus Aurelius. East of Mauritania was the province of Africa proper. The heart of the old Carthaginian Empire, Rome had claimed the territory after the final destruction of Carthage in 146 BC. The Romans were initially somewhat ambivalent about governing overseas territory, and their primary concern in Africa was simply to ensure that no other power established itself in Carthage's place. For the most part, though, the loyal client kingdom of Numidia was the one actually tasked with doing the heavy lifting of keeping Africa free from anti-Roman sentiment. Once Rome finally embraced its international character, though, Africa became a key center of agricultural production, providing the empire with a huge array of olives, corn, bean, figs, grapes, textiles, marble, wine, timber, livestock, pottery, and wool. Coastal cities became highly developed and fully Romanized, becoming major trade centers as well as producing high-quality crafts of their own, including their famous clay lamps, which became the class of the empire. After Augustus's final constitutional settlement, Africa had the unique distinction of being the only senatorial province that contained a legion, which was also, by the way, the only African legion stationed west of Egypt. In between Africa and Egypt was the senatorial province of Cyrenaica, which was a minor agricultural province that was distinguished by its wide variety of native medicinal plants. Most Romans barely registered Cyrenaica's existence until the Third Jewish Revolt erupted from its borders in 132. The slaughter and counter-slaughter that accompanied the revolt left the province depopulated to the point of it becoming something of a ghost town, forcing Hadrian to concoct a colonization program to prevent the lights from going out completely. To the east of obscure Cyrenaica was the incalculably important prefecture of Egypt. The rich Nile Valley was so critical that it wasn't even technically a province, and remained instead, from the time of Augustus, a country owned personally by the emperor. It was governed by an equestrian prefect, as Augustus and his successors felt that a senator could not be trusted with the task. Ruling in Alexandria was an easy stepping stone to ruling the entire world, and so no one of senatorial rank was even allowed to visit Egypt without express imperial permission. This was, you'll recall, possibly the reason why Tiberius had Germanicus killed. Egypt was not only the breadbasket of the empire and the key transfer point of trade with India and the Far East, but its capital of Alexandria was the center of culture, science, and the arts in the Greco-Roman world. Unfortunately for locals and Romans alike, though, imperial control of Egypt, enforced by the two legions run out of Alexandria, was often heavy-handed and arbitrary. Taxes were administered and collected heavily and randomly, leaving the locals resentful and the Romans hated, and from the late 130s on, Egypt was a constant source of anti-Roman agitation and revolt. But through it all, the ancient kingdom on the Nile River continued to pump out the grain that fed the empire. East of Egypt was Arabia, comprising most of what we now call the Sinai Peninsula. One of the last additions to the empire, Arabia was